This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. 2023 seems to be a pretty decent year for Star Trek fans. Well, I guess fans who may not have been enjoying the recent run of shows. Discovery is an absolute mess, and even the fans of that are mad at the direction it goes in. Picard's seasons 1 and 2 were just awful, especially when you were trying to make something for the more historical fans of the series. But then something very unexpected happened. Season 3 of Picard ignored much of the crap from the first 2 seasons and sort of acts like the next proper and final chapter for the TNG crew with a wonderful 10-episode send-off. It was like lightning in a bottle, and it showed how the people behind that season actually cared about the characters this time around. I watched 2 episodes each night for a week, and then I got wind of Star Trek Resurgence. I saw some clips here and there on Twitter when it launched, but I had no idea that this was a new game. I thought it was part of Star Trek Online, but to my surprise it was a new game in the same style of the Telltale games, and even made by some of the same people. And now, after beating it, I can confidently say that this feels like an experience aimed at trying to be something that you might see from the TNG days. It's really good and easily one of 2023's most overlooked games. Let's dive in.
Engage.
Let's start out with the gameplay. With this being a Telltale game, you'll be spending most of your time interacting with environments, engaging in discussions, making choices, and yes, plenty of minigames. To the game's credit, it does pepper a bunch of different minigames throughout the game to keep it interesting, but most of these bits are honestly just there to have the player do something while the story or conversation is going on. You might need to line up a transporter or do some things that are similar to QuickTime events. There are some more involved bits of gameplay as well. For one, there are a handful of phaser fights, and this acts like a cover-based shooter. The movement is limited and the aiming can be a bit wonky, but it's always fun to fire off your phaser. There's a few instances where you get to pilot a shuttle, and even some stealth sequences. And with this being a proper Star Trek game, you'll be using your tricorder on more than one occasion. Now, we'll dive into this a bit more later on, but I think this game would have been a bit better if the developers opted to focus on a handful of these minigames and really flesh them out. But as it stands, you get little bursts of different forms of gameplay, and thankfully they are rather short bursts. So if you don't really like one thing, you're not going to be doing it for that long. Now, at the heart of this game, the most involved gameplay elements are your choices. You will experience everything from options on what to say, along with usually having a 2-choice option that could alter how the story goes. What Telltale always did, and what they do well here, is that they have the illusion of choice. You're not going to drastically change the narrative to the point of it feeling like a completely new game, but rather you are making choices that alter it. But in the moment of that choice, and how it is sold to the player, it makes you feel like every one of these matters. There's a sense of urgency here that keeps you invested every step of the way, and for that, the developers deserve a lot of praise. Every time I made a choice, I wondered how it would go if I chose the other option, and so that does feed into replay value, maybe at least playing this game just one more time. One thing that I really liked is that at the pause screen, you can see each of the main players and how they are currently viewing you based on your choices.
The USS Enterprise D, under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, discovered a Takan outpost in the Delphi Ardus. According to the mission summary, an unbreakable energy-draining field was deployed against the Enterprise and a Ferengi ship. The Enterprise was only...
Well, let me be the first to say, welcome to the Resolute, Ambassador.
Thank you, Petty Officer...
Carter? Carter Diaz, sir.
I am pleased to meet you, Petty Officer Carter Diaz.
So how is the story? Overall, the narrative and characters are rather good. You play as two different characters, the XO Jara and engineering officer Carter. You get two different perspectives on the same ship. At many points in the story, these two will be separated from the ship, and the game does a good job of jumping between the two. Even from the very start, there is this feeling of respect for the Next Generation show, and Star Trek overall. You can tell the developers actually cared about this universe, and wanted to do it right. There's even some appreciated fan service as well. Spock shows up for a nice chunk of the narrative, and the voice actor does a great job with him. There even is a moment that feels like a self-insert by the writers when you meet Spock, and instead of being a self-insert where it's preachy to the player, this feels more cute and charming. I liked it. Riker even shows up at a few points, and the original actor comes back to voice him, which was a really nice touch too. The entire narrative feels like an engaging two-parter from the show. You are playing middleman between two races who are at odds with each other, and not everything is as it seems. Now, like I mentioned before, these developers obviously care about Star Trek, and it shows through how they made this game. But I need to point out something that was really appreciated. Now, I love action and firefights, and Star Trek does have some really great action, but one of the best parts of the shows is getting all of the senior staff together, and having them try to discuss and figure out a problem. I love seeing this stuff in the game. There are a good amount of times where the senior staff are in the briefing room, trying to find the best solution to their current problem. And with this being a choice-based game, you get to participate in those discussions. The same can be said for many of your major choices. They're a nice combination of Star Trek and the intensity you would get from a telltale choice. For example, you will be timed to make a choice, and many of the times the crew members will be giving you reasons why their way might be the best way, and then it's up to the player to make the final decision. This sort of stuff shows me the developers care, and I would say that as an entire game, it's very dialogue driven, rather than an action driven experience.
Captain Riker, this is my first officer, Commander Jara Rydek.
My pleasure.
Sir.
I wish we were all meeting under better circumstances.
So do I, although you and I have actually met before.
We have.
I was a young lieutenant on the Potemkin. You were first officer on the Tucker.
Now, I very much enjoyed this title, but I need to address some of the flaws. Much of these come down to stability and maybe ironing out some of the mechanics. There are the typical stutters and janky animations that you would see in a Telltale game. I have no idea why these are always present in a Telltale game, but they are here as well. There are several times where a character will repeat their line, or just not say the full lines based on the subtitles. The subtitles also would not turn on all the time, which was a bit annoying. There was one point where I needed to use my tricorder to pass, but the game would not let me use it, so I was stuck there and had to restart. The save checkpoints are not that good, so I had to replay 10 minutes before I got back to that point again, and thankfully got past it. There's some herky-jerkiness to some of the cutscenes. Some areas require you to scan everything before moving on, and in one spot it poorly conveyed to the player that the thing they needed was actually on the ground, and it blended in with everything else. There is one minigame that I had no idea what I was doing. It was related to a transporter segment, and I hated it. I felt like the information was poorly conveyed to the player. Some of the later shuttle parts were annoying because you would get hit by energy blasts where it seemed like you shouldn't take damage. This goes back to what I said before about the gameplay. I think the developers might want to consider just picking 2 or maybe 3 gameplay types and then fleshing them out. Make the shooting more fleshed out, along with the tricorder and investigating, instead of trying to do everything. This might be something to consider for a potential sequel. Lastly, there was a part at the end where a character showed up right before the credits, and it didn't really make any sense for them to be there. I was so confused and thought maybe the game glitched. Maybe someone else can shed some light on this for me. Star Trek Resurgence is a great surprise and is easily one of 2023's overlooked games. If you have been looking for some new Star Trek that actually feels like it was made with some love and care for the original shows, this is it. And if you have been missing Telltale, this should satisfy you as well. In comparison to other Telltale titles, I would say that this one ranks as one of their better ones. I had a great time with this, and it acts as a nice companion piece to this year's 3rd season of Picard. Maybe there is some hope for some good, respectful Star Trek content in the future, and I hope this game gets a sequel. Are you a fan of Star Trek? Which shows did you enjoy? Have you played Resurgence? Let me know all of this down in the comments below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.